Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. Today's webinar, Tips and Tricks to Tame Your Gmail Inbox, is part of a series of free webinars offered every week or two by the SPARCC Portage Area Computer Consortium, or SPARCC for short. SPARCC is an information technology center in Northeast Ohio where we support about 30 school districts. However, this webinar is open to everyone, and we would like to welcome all the people who have joined us live today who are watching the recording in the future. My name is Anthony Luscre, and along with my colleague Gary Kurtz, we are the Technology Integration Department at SPARCC. I will be your presenter for the session today. All of the information for today's webinar can be found at https://tiny.cc/SPARCC201. Again, that is tiny.cc/ that's the one with the question mark, SPARCC201. And if you're not there already, you may want to go to the page. From that page, you can get all the information for today's webinar, and you also get the handouts for today's session and a live document that please feel free to edit if you're watching it live. While you're out at our website, please be sure to check out our professional development schedule of upcoming webinars and other events, our recorded trainings of past webinars, and also sign up for our SPARCC Lines newsletter to always stay on top and up to date on our latest technology integration information. And finally, if you need to get in touch with either of us, you can find our contact information under the contact menu link. Today's topic, Gmail, is a very broad topic, and we're going to be doing the presentation a little bit different than usual today. I'm not going to have a slideshow for you. We're actually just going to jump into a variety of accounts, give you some examples of what everything looks like. So it'll be a little more hands-on today, and it may be a little more jittery as we jump between screens. I have set up 6 accounts so that we can view a variety of email settings today. So why would you use Google Gmail? Well, the first thing is, and my favorite, it is free. It's very easy to use, so even younger students can work with it. Many users, both staff and students, already have personal Gmail accounts, and thus they're already familiar with the technology and its uses. It allows for collaboration so students can work together. It's available online from any internet-connected device. There's an unlimited amount of storage that goes along with Google Apps for Education and the associated Gmail component. All the emails are automatically backed up. The actual screen is highly customizable by the user. Users have the ability to create filters which allow automatic management of incoming emails, and it works well with sharing and collaborating with Google Docs. We're going to go ahead and close the first screen here. And we're going to take a look at a sample Google inbox. Some people refer to it as Gmail, some people refer to it as Google Mail. I will be using both of them simultaneously today. If I was not at my Gmail, I could simply go to one of my other applications, go to the little box with 9 squares in the upper right-hand corner, which we refer to as the waffle, and click on that, and I could go out to my Gmail in that fashion. I've already got a tab open though, so let's jump back to that tab where it might be a little bit easier to see. The first thing I want to discuss is density. Some people get a lot of emails, some people get very few emails. Some people like to see a lot on the screen at one time, others want a nice clear screen. So the first thing we're going to talk about today is email density, and that brings us to a tool that we'll be using over and over again, and that is our settings icon that looks like a gear in the upper right-hand corner. I'm going to click on the drop-down box, and yours may look slightly different depending on what privileges you have on your system, but the 3 things we're most concerned with right now are the display density. Right now it's comfortable, which is a very wide display with a lot of margin between different emails. We're going to choose cozy, and you'll notice that it will become a little bit more cozy. We need to refresh the screen to see it. And it's kind of hard to tell the difference on this particular thing. Let's go all the way to comfortable, and you'll see what it looks like when everything is spread out. And for some reason, we are not seeing much difference. And that's probably because I am zoomed in here. But this is the way you change the density by using the comfortable, cozy, or compact. We'll be using this gear over and over again for other parts of our process. Now, one of the most unique things that you may encounter as a new email user with Gmail is the fact that it uses something called conversation mode. All the Gmails are grouped with the replies and the original message, and this creates a single conversation or a thread. The replies to the emails and the replies to those replies are all displayed in one place. So each line of our Gmail account may represent more than one message, both a sent message and a replied message. Now, some of you may feel very uncomfortable with this when you first get started, but I think it's probably the way you're going to want to do it after you see some of the things we do. But in case you do not want to, you can always go and turn the conversation mode off. And again, you can do that by going up to the gear and then going to settings. And we'll be digging a little deeper in the settings later, but remember, that's where you can turn off the conversation mode. I'm just going to give you a quick example. I'm going to jump over to another email here, and you'll notice that in this particular email, you see a 2 after it. That means that when we look at this email, we'll see the full conversation. Here's the first part of the message. Here's the second part of the message. So in this case, there's a reply. Let's jump back to our email again. And we'll take a look at another additional one here. Again, here's the original message. Here's the reply message right below it. And if you have a number of messages going back and forth, the numbers may go up very high. So we have 3 down here. And this part is not that necessarily that high. I'll jump over to my own email account for just a second here, and you'll see a lot more messages that have multiple threads in them. So for example, this has 16 threads in this particular message. Let's make it a little larger so you can see it a little better. And you know, as a matter of fact, the first one is not even in English. And that brings up a very interesting thing that you can do with Gmail, and that is you can translate a message directly in the square. Now, I wasn't planning on this, but let's just go ahead and click on Translate Message, and we'll see how this Italian translates the English. And it looks like it does a pretty good job. But you'll notice here that you see all of the messages and responses all in one single thread. So that's what the little number indicates. So you need to get used to that aspect of it. Also remember that the newest part of the thread is at the bottom. Some email systems put the replies at the top. Gmail puts them at the bottom. Now, we're going to look at a couple different styles of inboxes because you can customize your inbox to very special types. It defaults to an email box that looks something like the one we have in front of us right now, where there are categories: primary, social, promotions, and your categories may vary, and you can also change your categories. So let's take a quick look at this default screen. This is the default view, and see what's here. First of all, you will see your domain listed up in the top. Yours will look different than mine. You will also see the mail icon, the word mail here, and you'll notice that there's a little red arrow next to it. When we click on that, you notice we can flip between mail, contacts, and tasks. So if we want to go into our email program and see our inbox, we would go to mail, or if we want to go to our contacts, we can switch to that very easily. We have a nice large red button which says compose. That's where we will write a message from. Below that, we have a list of all of our folders that we have created. And I said folders. I'm going to say that again sometimes during our talk, but really Google calls them labels. So labels and folders are pretty much similar in they're the same thing basically, but people use different names, but Google calls them labels. And there is a few small differences between that and folders, which we'll talk about a little later. But you notice across the top of the default inbox, we have each of these different categories. So right now I'm in the primary, and you can see the email messages listed there. If I click on social, you'll see that I have a couple emails listed there. And on promotions, there's quite a few. And notice that what happens is I scroll down, my top bar goes away, so I do not see what category I'm in. So when I am in a category and scroll down, you will not be able to see that anymore. Now, no matter where you're at, you can always return to the original spot by simply clicking on the red inbox on the left. That'll bring you back to your primary account and to the top of your list. Your messages, Google will attempt to sort the messages for you automatically. You may change the classification if you'd like for particular incoming messages, and we'll talk about that in a few moments. Now, there's a number of other varieties of email that you can see. We're going to go ahead and take a look at those in just a moment. But before we do that, let's take a look at some of the things you can do with the tabs. So if I'm getting an email message from NGA subscriptions in this case, I can simply take that email, grab it, and drag it into one of the categories. And you notice that when I move it to that category, it's going to bring up a yellow window that says, this conversation has been moved to the promotions. If you do not want it there, you click on the undo. But you also have the choice, do this for future messages from the subscriber. Once I do that, all the messages from that particular subscribe@garden.org will automatically go into my promotions folder or promotions tab. So I'm going to click yes there, and we'll take a look and we will see it right there under our promotions. If we want to work with a single email, we can click on it and view that email. From that point, we have some controls across the top. The one you're probably looking for first is the trash can. That is where we can delete the message if we'd like to delete the message. But we have some other choices. We can move the message to a folder, or what Google calls a label, so we could put it on any of these labels. So if it was spam, we could move it to the spam area. We could also provide a label of the exact message, and we could choose any label we want, or we could create a new label. We can also come over here under more, and we have some choices. We can mark it as unread, mark it as important or not important. We can add the task, we can add stars, and we'll be going through these in a little more detail. We can also do something very interesting. We can create an event on our calendar. So if it refers to a date and time of an event, we can simply click on the create event, and that would take you into the Google Calendar, which we're not going to discuss today, but that was the way you would do it. We will be talking about filters a little bit later. Let's look at our message here, and you'll see that we also have a couple things on our message. We have the reply button, and then we have a drop down next to it that gives us more, very similar to the more at the top. And you'll notice we can do most of the things we can do from the top. One of the things we need to do from here, though, is if we want to forward a message. Let's go back to our email listing again. And you'll notice that we have a checkbox in front of each email message. If I check that box, that means that that particular email or emails have been selected. And if I select the emails, I then can work on all of the ones that are checked at one time. So for example, if I wanted to label them all the same thing, or if I wanted to delete them all, I could do that by just simply hitting the checkbox on there. The next area over is a star, and the star starts out clear. If we click on it once, it will become yellow. If we click on it again, it'll return it to clear. A little later, I'll show you how you can have more varieties of stars. The stars are simply to help you find a message that might be important to you. The next thing over is a little yellow arrow, and the arrow will tell you whether it thinks the message is important or not. Now, what it does is it gradually watches your email habits, and based on that, it will start to tell you whether the message is very likely an important message or not an important message. And as you keep clicking on this, you can make it an unimportant, or if you click on it again, you can make it important. So if you keep doing this with messages as they come in, Gmail will automatically learn which messages should be marked important and what should not. So probably you're going to want to make sure your boss's message or your superintendent or your principal or your teacher's message is marked with important on it. We'll talk a little bit more about marking important automatically later on. And then finally, we have our email. So let's go ahead now and take a quick look at a couple of the things we can do. So let's go ahead and compose a message. When we compose a message, it opens up a new window. First of all, we have the traditional to. We also have the CC, carbon copy, and the BCC on this side. So if I want to put a message in here, I can start typing, and if the person is in my contact list, they will automatically start appearing and showing up here. So I want to send the message to this test account email too. So if I click on that, it will put the message in there. I could also paste an email address into here, or I could also use an email group, which I could create in my contacts list and then just simply put in, for example, third grade teachers. And because I've already made that list up, it'll put all the third grade teachers' emails directly into the email. Carbon copy and blind carbon copy, when you click on them, it will then allow you to put something under there. So let's go ahead and again and start typing in a user, and we're going to send a blind carbon copy of this to email number 5. So you notice we have that on there. And now it says, hey, by the way, you're sending the email number 2 and email number 5. Usually when you send to these people, you usually also include these. So it's suggesting that you may want to include this. This is a really nice feature for when you're sending email to a group of people and you forget one person. It'll remind you very gently. If we don't want to do it, we just ignore that and just let it stay there. If we do want to add them, we can simply click on them and add them. For right now, we're just going to ignore email 3 and 4. We're going to click in the subject area, and we're going to type in our subject, and we'll call it webinar. And again, this part of the email is very similar to probably any type of email you use, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on it. Just want to show you a couple small things here. We can format the email with rich text formatting by highlighting a section, and then we go down to where it says formatting options. It looks like the letter A with an underline under it, and you will notice it brings up another menu with a variety of choices. We can make it larger, we can make it bold, we can change the font, we can center it, we could put bullet points. So all the things you could typically do with the message in a word processor, you can do with these tools. Across the bottom, we have another set of tools. The paperclip is to attach a file to it. If we click on that, it'll ask us to go out and find the file on our computer. Click on open, and it will show the message, the file that has been attached to the message, and the approximate size. If for some reason we choose that we do not want to send this, we could simply click on the X and that would remove it. Our next checkbox over is for inserting a file from our Google Drive. So if you're using Google Drive, you can simply click on that. It'll open your Google Drive and it'll let you pick a document. Now, unfortunately, this particular user, this test account, does not have any documents, but I would be able to select any document from there. We won't worry too much about the money right now, but this is where you insert a photo. The little chain is where you create a link to a website. So let's create a link to today's website. Again, the address is http://tiny.cc/SPARCC201. And excuse me, we'll go ahead and say okay, and we'll send it out. And now we have a link there to that message. I'm not even going to show you the emoticon because I don't believe in them. If you decide you do not want this message, you can discard it. If you do not discard it and you do not send it, it will automatically become a draft message that you can get back to later. So unless you click on the discard, it will go to your drafts folder. So if I would close this right now without clicking on discard, it would automatically go into my drafts folder, and I would then be able to come back to it later and work with it. You notice on the right, we even have more options here, and we can make our window default to full screen. We can put a label on it right now. We could put a star. We could check the spelling, and actually the spelling is checked as we go along by the Chrome browser that I'm working in. So we won't worry about that too much. We're going to go ahead and send this message. And now we will find out that it gives us a message saying your message has been sent. Do you want to view the message? Well, we can view it there, or we can go into our sent folder, our sent label, and we'll see that email message that we just sent out showing up here. This is all pretty common for most email programs, not a lot different. But let's look at some of the special features we can do. So let's go back to our inbox. And let's jump over to our settings button. We're now going to go down from the configuration button to where it says settings. Now, while I'm here, I'm just going to mention a couple things. I could put a theme in on my background if I wanted a different color background, if I wanted pictures in the background. This is all for aesthetics purposes. It does not have anything to do with the functioning of the program. There's also a very important section down here. Help is always available to you. But for right now, we want the settings section. When I click on that, you'll see that we have a number of tabs across the top for a variety of settings. So let's start off with our general setting. And as we go down through these, some of them are more important than others. I may skip over some completely, but you'll notice that we have some information in here on how many messages we want to show up on the page, whether we want images to display, and most of these we're just going to accept the default values and not worry about them. This is one you may want to change if you prefer a different default text style when you're creating documents, when you're composing. You can choose it from here, and that will automatically then be the default style that you can always change later, but you can set it from here to something that you might want it to be. Here's where you turn on and off the conversation mode, which I mentioned in the beginning. We're going to leave it on. And then we're going to go down to this little thing that says stars. And you know what? I like colorful things, so I can add a star by simply dragging it up to the top, and it will be made available to me. But you know what? I want all the stars, so I'm simply going to click on all stars, and now I have all these stars available for my use. Now maybe, let's say I don't like the pink exclamation mark. I could move it down here and take it away from the list, but you know what? I want all stars. Desktop notifications. If desktop notifications are turned off, you will see a small pop-up in the bottom right-hand of your corner of your screen. This may be very annoying if you're using your computer to teach students and a message comes across that is not something you want them especially to see. So it's your choice as to whether you want that on or off. Keyboard shortcuts, I would definitely suggest that you turn them on, and we'll talk about them later. So that's one default that I would change. The rest of this is a place to put a signature. If you'd like a fancy signature, if you'd like to have a picture, you'd like to have your favorite saying, you'd like to have your contact information, this is where you create it. And because it's a full HTML editor, you can make it multiple colors, multiple styles, etc. You can then choose to insert your signature before the quote marks or after your message. We're going to leave it as the default there. We're not going to create a message signature on this one. Down at the bottom is something that you have to be very careful, and I suggest you do not use this unless you really need to, and that's the vacation responder. Nothing more annoying than sending something out to a list of people and getting a bunch of responses back that someone's on vacation. So unless you really need to have everyone know that you're on vacation, I would just leave this default as off. But if for some reason you want to use it, when you turn it on, I would always make sure that you choose the last day. That means it'll automatically turn off on that day, and you won't have to worry about reverting back again when you return. And then that's about it. Now, the one thing we need to do is we need to click on Save Changes. A lot of places in Google Apps, you do not need to save changes because they're automatic, but in this case, we do need to save the changes, or our settings that we changed will not remain. So we're going to click on Save Settings. It's going to say that we're saved, and it brings us back to our inbox. So let's go back again to our configuration settings and go back to it. We'll take a look at our other tabs real quick. This tab on the far right is for themes. Again, you can set up themes from here. We're not going to worry about that today. The next one talks about labels, which we're going to be coming back to later. And then the third one talks about inbox. And this is where we can change which type of inbox. Right now we're using the default inbox with the variety of tabs on the top. If we hover our mouse over any of them, we will see examples pop up on the right of what might constitute one of these categories. If we do not want a category, we can simply uncheck it and it'll be gone. So it won't show up as one of the tabs on the top. So that's how we can change the default screen, or which I call the tab screen. Now, we also have a couple of other inbox choices. Right now we're using the default, but there is 4 additional choices which we'll be going through individually. The important first box, unread first, starred first, and priority inbox. And we'll be showing you examples of each of those on our other accounts. But we would change them from there if we wanted to change them. This is where you can set the importance markers on or off. And here's a little video you can watch on how to train your Gmail to use important marker at its optimum capacity. So we did not make any changes here, so we're just going to leave this as it is, and we're not going to do anything else with it. I'm just going to open up accounts real quick, but I would suggest you do not change accounts unless you're very familiar with how your email works. This can cause a lot of problems with your email if you do not know the technical aspects, and that's beyond today's presentation. Same thing with forwarding and POP IMAP. We're not going to talk about that today. Again, you do not want to change that unless you're very familiar with how email, POP, and IMAP function. So we've now looked at a lot of our choices here. Let's now go ahead and look at another account. This was email 1. We will go down and choose email 2, and it will pop up. And you will notice that we now have a new style. There are no longer 4 tabs across the top or 5 tabs across the top. We now have a category important, and then everything else. Now, why is something important? Because it has been marked with this little mark. It says important. If I remove that, refresh the screen, you will see that'll move down. Well, I think it's important, so it's going to keep coming back there. And it would eventually learn which ones were not important, which ones were. You'll also notice that when we've not read a message, it will be in dark print. When we've read a message already, it will be in a lighter or non-bold print. Also, whenever we hover our mouse above any of the email addresses and pause for a second, we can go and find all the emails that match. So let's go back to another account here real quick. It has a few more messages in it. And we could come in here and we could hover our mouse over this, and we could go to emails, and it'll show all the emails from or to that particular person. I forgot to show you something. Let's just go back real quick to our first email example here with the tabs and go back into our inbox. I wanted to show you that because we turned all those stars on, we now have the ability to cycle through a variety of colored stars. You simply keep clicking on it. Each time I click, it gives me another option. And if I don't want anything at all, I can simply click until I get back to blank. So that's how the all stars work that we turned on earlier. Just wanted to show you that real quick. So this is the type of email box called important and everything else. And that's one of our choices, again, by settings, inboxes, and then that would be the one that simply says important first. Let's take a look at a third type of inbox. This type of inbox has all my unread messages first, followed by everything else. So in other words, my messages that I've read. Again, we would set this by going into the gear, settings, inbox, and you notice this is labeled as the unread first box. Now you notice on each of these type of different email box configurations, there are certain items that you can add to the list, or certain settings that are specific to that one type of email inbox. You notice at the top we had a little brief problem there with our email connection. Hopefully it'll come back to normal here. But for now, we'll just go on and show you the next set of inbox style. And this is a little small, so we'll make it a little larger so you can see it. This is called the starred and everything else inbox. So if you apply a star to something and then refresh the screen, you will notice that that has now jumped from the bottom up into our top section. So anything we put a star on, every time we refresh the screen, it will be moved into the star section. If we remove a star and refresh the screen, it'll be moved down into the everything else section. So this is, again, one of our types where we go to settings, inbox, and from our inbox, we would choose starred first. And it gives us some options on the side here of how many items we want, because if we do starred first, we might eventually end up with all of our area being filled up with starred items and we wouldn't see anything else. So in this case, it has a default of 25. So let's take a look at our last style of email box. This style of email box is called important unread, starred, and everything else. And this is the one I use with my work account. I like it because it gives me a quick view in the morning of my important unread emails. It keeps my starred messages handy for me to see, and then everything else, whether it's read or unread, shows up below that. Again, we do the same thing to activate this type of account. We go over to our little gear, settings, inbox, and you notice we have some choices here. Now we could also add another section if we wanted to for unread or for more additional options. So we can have not only important and unread, starred, and everything else, we could add these additional types of inboxes. So actually we can have 4 different areas on our screen instead of just the 3 that I have right now. You can also choose the order in which the unread emails show up. And again, we can also use the importance markers. And again, that is something that develops over time. So let's return back to our inbox and take a look at this real quick. I'm going to flip over real quick here to my school email account. Maybe it's not going to cooperate. So we'll just go back to my other account that I have open here. And from this account, I just want to show you a couple of things real quick. When we click on a message and we remove it, it will be moved into a folder that's actually out of our view here because it's down a little bit lower, called trash. The messages that are put in trash will remain for approximately 30 days in your trash, and they can be recovered by clicking on your trash, simply taking the message and then removing it and putting it back into one of our other labels, such as the inbox. If we want to empty our trash, we can click on all the messages in there that are in our trash and click on the delete forever button. You do not need to do that with Google Apps because you have an unlimited amount of storage space. So I wouldn't worry too much about getting rid of messages because I've never had anyone come up to me and say, Anthony, I really wish I didn't have this message right now. They usually come up and ask, Anthony, I'm really sorry. I deleted this message and I can't find it. So I'm a hoarder as opposed to a thrower-outer. So you have to, depending on your style, you would choose one of those 2 things. What I wanted to show down here near the bottom, though, is a spam folder. Gmail is very good about finding messages that it thinks are spam. Now, in this newer account, it's had nothing sent to it that it thinks is spam. If a message does show up in your spam folder and it is not spam, you simply select it and then you tell it that it is not spam from the message up here at the top. We don't have any to work with right here, so we can't show you. Once we do that, it will then put preceding messages from that sender into our inbox instead of our spam. So let's talk a little bit about the additional features that we can set up. So let's return to this inbox real quick. In addition to stars and importance, we talked about labels earlier. So I can simply select an email. Let's choose this one from Anthony Lusky here. And I can go up and say labels. And I can choose to add one of these labels, or I can create a new label. So let's create a new label and let's call it Anthony. And we could nest it under the inbox or the sent messages or anywhere we wanted to, but we're not going to. We're just simply going to create a new label, and it will appear that there's a new folder on the left. You'll see that in a moment. Notice we now have an Anthony. You notice now that it says Anthony on the label, and the label's there. It's gray, rather boring. So if you really want to distinguish it, you come over to Anthony's label on the left, choose a little drop-down arrow, and you can choose to label the color of your label. You also have some other things you can do. You can change some other settings on here, but for right now, we're just going to go ahead and add that color. And if there's not a color that you like, you can add a custom color combination. So if you want to have orange on black, that's fine. The nice thing about having a label on a message, it's easy to find later, and I can simply go into here, which would normally be considered our folder, but these are actually labels again, as I said, and all the messages will show up under that label for that particular message. Now, because this has not been read yet, it's still showing a label being in my inbox. So once I read it, by clicking on it, if we go back again, you will see now. Let's go ahead and take it out of there. You'll notice that it's still in my inbox. If I threw it in the trash or I deleted it, it would still remain labeled with Anthony, but no longer will it say inbox. Now that's fine if you want to mark something, but the real advantage is if you can have the label applied automatically when a message comes in. So let's say every time we got a message from a particular user, we wanted to label it. So what we would do to do that is simply choose a message from that person, in this case, email number 3. He's very important. So we'll click on that message, and we'll go up to the top, and we'll now, instead of putting a label directly on it, we are going to go up to more, and we're going to choose the one that says filter messages like these. You can also right click and choose that same tool with the right click message menu. But in here we'll use the more, and we'll say filter messages like this. Now, this uses the same characteristics that we will use to sort for messages a little bit later, but right now in the filter, it's guessed. It's just a guess. It assumes that I want to filter this based on the email address. So it put the email address in there automatically on the from. And you know, in this case, that's what I wanted. But I could have also had it be a variety of other things. I could always have it say, you know, if it ever has the word food in it, spell that correctly. If it ever has the word food in it, I want it to be labeled automatically if there's food, and I want to work with it as a filter. So I can choose my filter based on who it's from, who it's to, the subject, whether it has certain words, whether it doesn't have certain words. Some of the things I cannot base my filter on is the time it was sent, the size of the time that it was sent to me. I can also additionally choose the little settings at the bottom if it has attachments, if it doesn't include chats, if it's a specific size. So I have all these. The one thing I can't do is I can't base it on when it was sent. So we're going to go ahead and continue with the filter as it was originally set up. So let's just start this again. We'll close this. Let's go back and start from the beginning. Create a filter. I'm sorry, let's go all the way back here and say filter messages like this. It has the email address in there. So that's my first step. The next step is I click on the blue section down here that says create filter with this search. Now, it's going to filter anything that comes from email number 3, but what is it going to do with it? This is the section of the filter where we choose what actions we want to take place when it finds a message from email number 3. So I could simply skip the inbox and have it archived. That means I'd still have the message, but it would not show up in my inbox. So why might I want to do this? Let's say, for example, I subscribe to a mailing list that I don't read very often, but I still want to make it available if I need to look at it later. I could skip the inbox and send it directly into archives. I could also add a star to it. So when I click on start, I will get a choice of adding a star to it. Now, unfortunately, I don't get to choose what color star it's going to be here. I just put a star, so it'll be a yellow star. I then also can apply a label. So let's click on this, apply a label, and let's choose a label. Well, you know what? I don't want it to be Anthony. I want it to say email 3. So I'm going to click on new label, and I will create a new label called email 3. Say create. And now it says it's going to apply this label. There's a couple other things we can do. We could add a forwarding address and forward it. So notice that forwarded is grayed out here until we add a forwarding address. Gmail requires you to add the forwarding address and then have the person who owns that address confirm that they want to receive messages. So we're not going to go ahead and do that right now because we do not want that to be forwarded. So let's continue back with our filter, which I have now messed up. And start again with the same one. So again, here's our same thing. We're going to jump over real quick. This time we're not going to choose to forward it. We're just simply going to choose a label, and we're going to choose email 3 for the label. We have some other choices. We could have it automatically deleted. So if there's spam that you get from someone or messages you don't want, you can filter them, automatically have them deleted. Nothing else happens to them. Also, if you get messages that tend to get sent to your spam because they have certain words in them, you can tell it, do not send this to spam. If it ever has the word food in it, I do not want it to go to spam because it's very important to me. Now, I can also choose to mark something as important, or I can choose to never mark it as important. I can also categorize it using any of these categories, so it would go into a specific tab at the top. Now, at the very bottom, every time you create a filter, if there's any other messages that match the criteria for the filter, it will ask you, do you also want to apply these to other messages that match the criteria? Now, you may or may not see that if there are no other messages that match the criteria, or it may say apply this filter to 100 other matching conversations. So if I do this, it'll retroactively go back and mark those and take the same action with the filter on those as on our message here. So let's go ahead and create the filter. And now the filter has been created, and we can come up here and learn more by clicking on this little learn more, but I'll walk you through what it's done. So you notice right here, we now have the email 3 marking on here. And again, it's boring, so let's change the way the email 3 label is going to look, and it will automatically be that color then any other time it comes in. So now email 3 will be blue. So we can choose to set up filters for any variety of things we'd like. Let me go back to my other account here real quick. Okay. One second. Okay, so let's go into my email box from work. And you notice my colleague Eric is very important to me. So whenever I get any messages that have him as the sender, it automatically marks it as Eric. It also puts an important on it. My director's name is David, so I make sure that everything from David goes on there. And anytime someone sends me information about a conference, I put this little conference in front of it. And look, I get a direct deposit every month, so I want to make sure I find that, so I have a label on that. So all of these are working with the process of filters. Then what happens is if I look on the side here, I will find all those messages that match that filter. So let's look at the direct deposit real quick, and you will see all of the messages that match my direct deposit of my paycheck. So let's close that one a second. And let's return back to the one we were working in earlier. Now, with these different inbox styles, you can always change them, and you can keep changing them as many times as you want. You can change them daily. So let's go in right now and change this one with the default 4 tabs or 5 tabs across the top by going into settings. And let's change it to one of our other inbox choices. Let's choose the one that says starred first. We'll go ahead and always remember to save changes when you make a change in settings. And you notice now our tabs are gone, and now all the starred messages are showing up first here. In this case, it only happens to be one, so everything else shows up under the other. Now, again, well, you know what? I really didn't like that, so let's go back to our other setting again. Inboxes, starred, and now we're going to choose the default. The default, again, is the one that has the categories. I know it doesn't say categories, it says default, so you just have to remember that. I have a nice little chart for you in the handout that describes how each of the different inbox styles look, and it tells you how to change them. So we're back to our little categories again right here. So there's a sheet in our handout called examples of each of the 5 types of inboxes, and shows you all a quick example of how they all look. Okay, we talked about important a couple times, and I said I'd describe how it works. So Gmail uses a couple factors, as I said earlier, to determine what's important. If you email someone a lot, it assumes that that's probably an important person. If there's messages that you always open when they come from a specific person, they're more likely to be important. Whereas, you know, I get the advertisements and I might not even open them to read them. But if there's some sender that I always open their messages from, it's very likely that I'm very concerned with seeing their messages, so it's going to classify it as a important message. Also, keywords that spark my interest. If it sees that I always open messages about food, it's going to assume that anything with the word food in it is probably important to me. If I reply to messages, again, that the more I reply to specific messages means it's more likely to be an important message. And then finally, if you use stars, the stars will tend to indicate that it must be of importance to you, and it will start to mark it as important. So there's a whole variety of logic that takes place in the background that you do not even need to worry about, and Gmail will become trained for your importance ranking. Now, let's say a certain type of message isn't getting classified as important. You can even help Gmail more to clarify the messages more accurately. When you mark a message, it will move to the appropriate section. This helps Gmail learn that you care most about it. So earlier I showed you how we move between different tabs on the top. We could also come in and we could choose to mark the message as important or unimportant. So we can force it to be an important or unimportant message. By doing that, it allows us to help train Gmail. Now, earlier when I talked about the labels, we've done labels 2 ways. We've selected a message and applied a label. We've also used filtering to apply a label. An additional way I can apply a label is by simply looking on the side here, taking a message and dragging that under one of my labels. So if I drag it into a label here called email 3, it will then also become labeled with email 3. So if I look at my email 3 folder, I will see that I have a couple items in there. Now, one of the most confusing things is you say, well, there's nothing that says email 3 on that. That's because it knows you're in that email box, and you notice that it shows us up at the top that those are all labeled with email 3. So let's return back to our inbox a second. Now, a couple things you can also do with your labels is you can put them under other labels. So I'm going to grab this email 3 and I'm going to put it under Anthony. So notice how when I click on it with my mouse and hold it, I can drag it and make it a subfolder of Anthony. And it's not going to want to jump in there real quick, so we might have to force it. The other way we can do that is we can simply go on the side here and we can edit our label. and choose to nest it under one of our choices, such as Anthony. A little easier for you to see that. Now you notice that under Anthony, there's a little arrow on the left. That means that there's a drop down, and notice that I can have multiple folders under multiple folders. In other words, as Google calls them, I can have labels nested under other labels. Now, if you ever have a label that you don't want, you can always come in and delete the label from that message. So we simply click on the message, go to our more, and we can, wrong one, go to our labels, and we can manage or remove a label, change a label, create a label there. Now, the same way that we used filtering earlier, we can use that to search. So there's a searching area at the top here with a little blue search magnifying glass on it. So we can search for a variety of things. So in this case, let's look for a message that has the word Advent in it. And you notice it already starts to use the same sort of logic that it does when you do a Google search. It guesses based on things that are already there. So you notice it found two things that have one called Advent, one called Advent Calendar. So it's pretty much guessing what I'm probably going to want. Now, these top three are in my email, and there might be more. I can tell because it has a little magnifying glass on the side of it. If it has the blue G as in Google, that means it's going to go out on the web and search for it. It's not going to search in your email. So you have to remember that only the ones that have the little magnifying glass to the left of them are the ones that will be searched for in your email. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this, and it will show me a message that has the word Advent Calendar in there. So we can use this filter for a variety of different things. Now, we can simply type in as we did that time, but we can even get fancier. If we come over to the far right, we can choose the show search options, and you might recognize this. I'll give you a minute to guess. This is the same as the box we saw when we were doing a filter. So basically, this searching and the creative filter box are both the same thing. So we can choose different characteristics in here that we want to search by. First of all, we can choose which email we want to search through. One thing that's very important is if you're searching for something that is in the spam folder or the trash folder, you will not find it by just searching through all mail. You must go down to where it says mail and spam and trash. Now, I know that sounds a little confusing, but just believe me on that. If you search under all mail, it considers spam and trash separate from that email. So you want to choose this if you want everything. So we'll choose that for everything. We can then put a from in here. We can put a to. We can put a subject. We can put words, doesn't have words. So all the same characteristics that we use when we were setting up a filter can be used to do a search. So let's come in here now. Let's just say we want to find messages that have attachments. So we'll go ahead and we'll go ahead and click on search mail. Now, before I do that, I want to show you that down at the bottom here, I have a choice when I'm searching this way to look for a specific time frame. So let's say I'm only interested in messages that occurred within the last 2 days, 3 days, 1 week, 2 weeks, etc. I can choose a date, any date from my calendar in the past. Of course, you can't choose the future. And I can choose to have it look in a time frame around there. If we simply leave this blank by clicking on none, it will go away. And when that's blank, it means it's not searching for a specific time period. We click on the little blue magnifying glass, and it will find all the messages that have attachments. Now, that points out something else I wanted to mention. We've been looking to the left of the messages, but we've not looked at the right. On the right, you'll notice we have a couple things. We have paper clips. That means there's an attachment. We also have the date of the message, and we have the time if it's less than a day old. So less than a day old, we'll see time. More than a day old, we'll see the date of the message. We're going to jump back over to my email box just real quick here because I need a few more messages. And I want to talk a little bit about keyboard shortcuts. One nice thing with keyboard shortcuts is if I'm reading my email, I might not want to keep going back and forth to my inbox, back and forth to my inbox. So what I can instead do is I can use keyboard shortcuts. And the keyboard shortcuts I use the most are J and K. J will move me forward to the next message. So I can just walk all the way through my messages. Oops, I went too fast. I want to go back and look. I can use K and it will move me to the previous message. So J and K will let me move through all my messages without having to worry about going back to the inbox. I can set up a wide variety. I can use a wide variety of keyboard shortcuts that are built. And if there isn't one that I like, I can even create my own. But the most common ones I think you'll find yourself using is J and K for moving through your messages. A U will refresh the message list. In other words, if a new message just came in or if something's been labeled, the letter U will refresh it. If you're in a conversation and you want to move to the next message, let's go to a conversation here. There's the first message in the conversation. If I press the N key, it will show me the next message in the conversation and the next message and the next message. So you see the name is changing at the top for each of these messages. So this is all one conversation message. I can do the same thing by scrolling my mouse, but a quick shortcut is the letter N. And if I want to move back through those again, I can use the letter P to move back through them. And that pretty much is the wide variety of things that you can do with Gmail. I have a whole extensive list of shortcuts available for you to take a look at. I have a whole help section for you to take a look at. And again, that is available to you by going to the section for today on, I'm not going to be able to find it probably here. Let's see real quick if I can find it. Sorry, can't bring the splash screen up. But just by going to tiny.cc/SPARCC201. Now, when you're done with this webinar today, I invite you to take the examination. There's a 5-question examination. If you pass the examination, you will be emailed a certificate of completion for 1 hour. If you do not pass it, you'll be given other opportunities to pass it. In addition, we would really like your feedback on all the webinars we do. So there is a section on evaluation. So when we would go to this link, you will see the recorded webinar, if you ever want to go back to it. Right here, and you can play it. Then you also find my resources. This is a booklet I created. Here's a link to the evaluation, and here's a link to the session quiz. So again, I'd like to thank you for joining us this afternoon for the webinar. Please feel free to sign up for our newsletter, and you can do that simply by going to the PD schedule and seeing all the different sessions that are available. Or you can go to the home section, scroll near the bottom, and subscribe to SPARCC newsletter, and that will allow you to receive notification of upcoming webinars. Again, thank you very much, and please provide feedback to us so we can make these webinars good for you. Thank you and good evening.